Hey guys, I want to talk about some weird and interesting uniques and weird mechanics, and I was working on the build with these items, but then the next day I woke up and I saw that GG posted a video, a highlight video by Flickr slide using pretty much exactly the same items. So you're probably not gonna be surprised by these items if you saw the video. Now the main two items that were, or I guess three items that were discussed in that video, there are some secrets about them, or at least about one of them. So let's start with the Sadist Mercy. This alone doesn't seem that interesting, and by the way, the build that I'm showing, most of the damage, if not like 90% of the damage, is coming from this weapon, which is triggered automatically through Acolyte of Chayula hidden node. This one from the Acolyte of Chayula, which is an Archon buff which requires glory. When you use that buff, every 3 seconds it creates a tornado. Normally tornadoes are spells, but in this case tornadoes are attacks and they use your weapon hit. And like there's no very fast hitting mace skill that you would use, and I believe you can trigger this like 20 times per second. So essentially when tornadoes start hitting enemies, every hit will hit with this weapon. It will increase monster power because every grueling menace gives plus 1 power up to 10. So normally bosses would have 20 power. You hit with 10 grueling madness stacks, and now bosses have 30 power. And the reason why you want enemy power is this thing. So I'm not entirely sure how exactly everything comes together. You get flat damage. By the way, this is not an attack. The skill from the weapon is not an attack. It's a persistent buff which does physical damage. It releases like a small orb that chases down enemies. It does have base damage, and it also uses monster health, because we always use 8% of monster health and adds that as a flat damage. But I believe this cannot be scaled, but it is still scaling the rest of the damage. It's getting 5% more damage per power of the enemy. Against normal and magic monsters it's triggered on kill, and against rare and uniques it's triggered on the hit. Any attacks when you hit, you trigger these apparitions. Now quickly, one bad thing about these apparitions: if there are two targets, they chase a target that is further away, not the target that it procs from, which is really annoying in some cases. And sometimes you see that you're fighting rare or like unique and it's not dying because they all like fly away and hit something else until there's nothing else left. But when you're fighting a single boss and there's nothing else, they all pretty much immediately explode and do not that much damage, but once you get more and more tornadoes, they start working more frequently and more frequently, the damage just ramps up insanely. So now with this weapon alone, let's say you already have 30 power for bosses. Then you can double enemy power in two ways actually. First of all, and the cheapest, is a red blade banner. Enemies in your presence counts as having double power. So you essentially also want to have a decent presence area. This is, by the way, I already reworked the build, but you can get a lot bigger presence area, and actually that was my presence area, 6.3 meters, which is very big and pretty much full screen. So enemies in that presence area would get double power. Another cool thing is that it has pretty interesting synergy with Vestige of Darkness. This is sort of, if you know about Shrine Scepters, it works in a similar way. It's an unscalable damage. It's not even your hit, it's not your damage, it's not a minion, it's not an ally, it's not an enemy, and it seems to scale damage with the area level, just like the Shrine Scepters. So you cannot really directly influence the damage on the Bodach. It just appears and uses 1 out of 4, I think, random skills. I was not able to figure out what damage type it is. It's either pure physical or it is physical and partially converted into cold. If it's pure physical, then it also has this inbuilt physical damage from hits contribute to chill and freeze buildup, which I think it is pure physical most likely with that modifier, because it can freeze very easily. So this thing also targets enemies in your presence, and it does scale with monster power. Now here's a secret about this. First of all, by default it strikes once every 3 seconds. It increases frequency, how do I say this, scaling 5% faster per enemy power in your presence. If there's only one boss and you double the enemy power, so you get 60 enemy power, it's gonna add 300% faster. It's more like faster cooldown sort of like that. But here's the secret about this helmet, which wasn't not mentioned in GG's video. There is a very expensive version of this helmet. When you search for this helmet, there is a number that you can search for that makes it more expensive. When you search this Bodach haunts your presence, you can enter a number 2, between minimum 2 and maximum 2. That way it's gonna be a lot more expensive, but the base strike delay is gonna be 2 seconds rather than 3 seconds. And you can actually read it on the wiki. It's only on the corrupted one, and there is no way of telling that in game. Pretty much have to place it on the market, and then on the market you can see there is a number 3, which is not gonna change even if you corrupt to 2, which is a bit annoying. But like I said, if you search for 2, it's gonna bring up the correct corrupted. If you have a corrupted one like that and you don't know, is it 3, is it 2, is it 4, you have to place it on the market and then search for your own trade and then see if it appears when you search for 2, or is it some other number. It's only expensive if it's 2, number 2. Now think about this. When tornadoes hit, like let's say 10 or 20 enemies on the screen in your presence, they all very quickly gonna get extra 10 power. Normal monsters have like 1 only power, but all of a sudden, let's say all of them have plus 10 power, and you have like 20 monsters on the screen with combined 200 power. All of a sudden it's gonna start going crazy and striking even 5 times per second, depending on how many monsters they are affected. It helps with clear speed by a lot, but for single target Bodach alone is pretty bad. However, this weapon, I think it shines against single target, but you do want bigger presence area, which you can actually increase quite easily. The way I was doing, I was using from nothing with the giant's blood, which allows me to allocate these. All of these have presence area, and this one also, because I am consuming 100 glory when I use this the Archon buff, I'm essentially getting up to 60% attack damage, and attack damage only affects tornadoes. And then you can also get Megalomaniac. You essentially search every notable that has presence area and find the cheapest ones, and this one was the cheapest one. Allocates this node 30% presence area, glory generation, which is also very useful for this, and armor applies to elemental damage is also pretty nice. You can also go for a lot more expensive one that has 2 nodes that have presence area. The way I did this passive tree, I was already traveling towards presence area here. I picked up skill effect duration, which is needed for tornadoes, more skill effect duration here, a bit more skill effect duration here. And here's another thing that people probably overlook regarding Grueling Madness. You are essentially getting 100% more slow magnet. Each additional Grueling Madness instead increase the slow potency of debuffs on the target by 10% each, and you can apply 10, so you're getting 100% slow potency, which includes temporal chain, chill. I believe it does not improve freeze, but also maim, hinder. So I even have a feeling that this could be kind of game breaking if you optimize for the maximum slow. I was even using these gloves, which does increase slow magnitude by another 30%, and I was running Blasphemy temp chain. So Blasphemy also lowers the potency of temporal chain. Very often against some enemies I would even see over 80% chill, sometimes even I believe about 70% temporal chain, which is nuts. You're not gonna see that on bosses, but even against bosses quite often I would see like 50-40% chill. So I am applying chill myself and freeze buildup. The helmet makes my physical damage contribute to chill and freeze buildup, and Bodach itself also has pretty good chills and freezes, which is not affected by your slows. But the bad part about running Blasphemy temporal chain is that it does not update it dynamically. Ideally you would probably want to cast it manually, but I mean, who has time to cast it manually? I think this Blasphemy temporal chain works really well with this setup. Enemies sometimes are so slow, sometimes it takes like 10 seconds for them to attack once, but it doesn't add mitigation, so you still need to figure out defenses. And for defenses, once again I decided to just go with Reverie, since I wasn't getting hit very often. Now here's another thing that maybe not many people notice, that actually 2 things. You can actually double enemy power with the grip of Kulemak now. When you hit an enemy, it applies Abyssal Wasting on hit, which is just a regen reduction on enemies. However, there's also a line like this. This is from Amanamus, and it's not an expensive modifier. Targets affected by Abyssal Wasting in your presence have double power. However, this also reduces presence area, so you kind of need to overcompensate for that even more. But this means you do not need to use Red Blade Banner Shield. However, it means you do need to hit enemies before you double their power, And then there's another thing which can add another 5 enemy power, this one. So I was even experimenting using this shield instead of Red Blade Banner and running Grip of Chayula to double enemy power. It's kind of simple. To make it short, once you raise shield, there's an AoE happening. Look at this. You see this AoE? Once you raise shield, only once every 2 seconds, you apply a debuff on enemy, which increases their power by 5. However, this also ramps up armor, which is not really automated because it only happens unless you like keep walking around and applying this all the time. But I haven't really experimented with that much, just didn't really like doing this. But essentially, yeah, that's how you can get an extra 5 power. Just to go over everything again, you get extra 10 power from the Sadist Mercy, then you can add either extra another 5 power from this or double enemy power with this, and then you can also use Grip of Chayula to double enemy power. Now regarding the Chayula monk and the Archon, you kind of want Dominion Anointment. Isn't very cheap, but I just bought this for 2 divines and then crafted all the modifiers. The important part is that when Archon buff expires, there is a 20-second cooldown normally. That's why you want this, because it bypasses the Archon cooldown. And the Archon buff by default lasts only 10 seconds. And in my case, I did want to increase the Archon buff duration. So I went all this way, traveled, pick up Archon stuff here. There's Archon buff duration, then there's speed while we have Archon and even resistances, and also increased effect of Archon buffs on you, because this also lowers or reduces Archon buff on you. And by the way, this Archon buff is 25% more physical and heals damage, and also chance to wither enemies for 4 seconds on a hit. I believe this is also part of the Archon buff. So you lose 50% of that immediately, and you want to kind of regain that by taking the increased Archon buff effect. And I also wanted to pick up remnant nodes. I wanted to be able to pick up remnants from further away, also chance to generate another one, and also here to have a chance to grant their effects twice. And also here to recover life and mana each time you pick up a remnant. And look at this, I'm standing here and it's picking up remnants, not all the time, but it's very easy to sustain 10 stacks. By the way, I already refunded this build, so it's a bit different pickup range, but it's pretty easy to maintain 10 stacks. Into the breach essentially creates these remnants, and normally it creates 3 different colors. One, either leeches life, leeches mana, or gives you 7% damage as extra heals for 8 seconds and stacking 10 times. So normally you can get up to 70% damage as extra heals. But if you pick up this node, it always creates the purple ones. This node also has 50% increased effect of remnants, and also gives another 50% can collect from further away. So you are getting a lot of damage as extra heals from these remnants. And on top of that, Archon also gives you more physical and heals damage. So yeah, that covers the basic mechanics. Now the supports that I was using for the tornadoes, I use tornadoes mainly as utility thing. So actually I even forgot to use increased AoE support. I added even more duration support. The Hero's Master doesn't really add that much. It's mostly just AoE and more duration. The attack speed does not affect them. I verified that with the Infinite Poison Spear. So every 3 seconds you create another tornado, and they do not have a limit. The only essentially limit is how long they last, and I believe you cannot modify how frequently these tornadoes are created. They can do damage, but I'm not sure if it's really worth scaling their damage that much. They're usually to proc some other things, and I'm not using repulsion because I wanted to have strong temp chain with blasphemy instead. As for the weapon supports, I'm trying to break armor because they are pure physical. The Chayula monk adds damage as extra hairs on top of that, and I tried multiple different setups using the rune that breaks armor based on your ward. Didn't really break very quickly. I also tried adding poison support and corrosion support on the tornadoes. That way the poison would apply like strip armor, but that also wasn't really working out very well. You could still add that, but yeah, when you hit a lot of enemies and start applying poison, and in my case also bleed, I'm not sure what, but something starts causing like massive performance, even stutters, like even frame freezes. I'm not entirely sure what. I wanted to avoid going with poison, so I'm going with armor break, Uruk smelting to break armor fast and apply permanent 5% increased damage each time we break armor. And then for the damage conk effect, I don't think that per AoE matters because we chase down enemies anyway. The physical mastery is not that great, but there is a very expensive support physical as extra heals, but you're already getting so much extra heals damage that I don't think that it would matter that much. Most of the damage for this skill is coming from getting damage from monster life. The more life monsters have, the more damage it adds to this skill, and that's why armor break I think is important. Now, I was also using Fragments of the Past. This is an attack version of the Volcano, linked with the short fuse and projectile acceleration free, and even overabundance. That way I can create 2 of them, and the less duration didn't really seem to matter because I already had so much increased duration. To build up glory, you just need to attack with any hits that do physical or heals, and you will build up glory. There's also another thing. You can have a bit of physical taunts, and because you're gonna be getting physical as extra heals each time enemy hits you, if it's melee, you're gonna proc taunts back to them, and you're gonna build up glory. But that's not really reliable. A much better way is to just use a skill like Fragments of the Past. It hits pretty frequently, and it doesn't cost any mana. And I do have massive ward sustain because 1 rune, recover rune from Life Flask. The video is already getting long, so I will include path of building import code in the video description. I already explained the main parts and already explained the support, so I think that pretty much covers everything. Now, like I mentioned, I already refunded the build and I'm attempting to do auto spark once again, but now getting more damage as a Chayula monk, and it seems to have a potential to be viable. So the next video will probably be my last video this league, and hopefully it's gonna be a successful auto spark 3.0. because I already did 2 versions in the past. So for now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one hopefully. Bye bye.